parking now. She used to do used to be car sharing, now it's parking. Yeah. Yeah. Hi, how are you? Doing well. Okay.
On the same subject, if I could come in after them to fill in any gaps.
Okay, then you probably need to hand me this later.
Okay.
But just make sure I get it.
Got it.
Yep. And you need to have your group all sign in. Yeah, yeah, plenty of time.
All right, Mr. Best, I have 7:30. Let's get started.
Welcome to the February 7th Transportation Commission. Before we get started, I'd like to make an announcement. Gene Hubbard passed away about 2.5, 3 weeks ago. Mr. Hubbard was both a member of Transportation Commission, then of Planning Commission, and then the representative to Transportation Commission, then back to Transportation Commission. So he spent, I believe, over 30 years really being a resident, representing various bodies to the county. And really, what a genuine, nice person. Back in the day when we used to deliver the packets, he would always have me in. He typically would show me photographs of how Arlington used to look. And just a lovely, lovely person, and he's now passed and be remembered fondly. I don't know if many of you knew him or not. Yeah. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Best.
Item 1 is citizen comment. We have no speakers for item 1. Item 2 is the General Assembly session update. Jim Larson here is to give both item 2 and 3. 3 is the micro-mobility marketing plan. Jim, thanks.
Chair Slatt, Commissioners, it's good to be back again so soon, but we continue our pilot. I've kind of consolidated in the thing I gave in front of you, which isn't technologically working, and as you probably know, when we're talking about the General Assembly, things happen every hour. So I'm giving you a little snapshot of what I knew a couple days ago, and I'll give you a little further update or answer any questions of what I might know. Just to remind ourselves, the recap pilot was approved 2018, thanks to the support of the Commission here. Pilot launched October 1, Lime and Bird were approved. 2018, Lyft approved for e-scooters. 2018 in December, Lime approved for e-bikes, Bird approved for fleet expansion to 400, which means they met that increment to be able to 50 and 50. And then in 2019, Spin and Jump were approved. Neither have deployed yet. Spin, 200 e-scooters, Jump, 350 e-scooters and 350 e-bikes. And Skip and Bolt have applied for e-scooters. These are some of the companies that are out there. There are more. Actually, Spin is about to deploy tomorrow. This is how the things change. You don't quite know who's coming. Winter, of course, kind of slowed things down, I believe. We don't know if there'll be more coming along, but that's where we are right now. Bolt, as a side note, really quickly, is based in Miami, Florida. They're only operating in Fort Lauderdale, and they're looking to expand to 3 or 4 other areas. We're one of them. I asked them if they had winter snow removal plans based on their experience in Fort Lauderdale. Anyway, we'll see how that goes. Next page, this kind of, it's hard to read, but gives you an idea what's kind of going on in that October to January period. Almost 200,000 e-bike and scooter trips, almost 200,000 miles traveled. Notice that the Lyft data is only through December 2018. So that gives you an idea what's going on right now. Next page. It looks like I'm getting into the updates without telling you the rest of the General Assembly, but 20 reported crashes. Top 4 issues, which we knew before: sidewalk, improper parking, unsafe behavior, underage riders. Interestingly, and I may say it on the next slide, but basically, because of wintertime, we do see a decrease in the full number of reporting coming in January. We hope that part of that is because education and ridership learning and behavior is part of the situation. Of course, when we get back full swing with everybody, we'll continue to watch that information. I would tell you that we had just had our last vendor meeting Monday. The group is, I think, very cooperative. They're trying to work with us, trying to, be part of the team. Of course, not everyone is equal, and we keep working with them side by side to keep that moving in a positive direction. I was recently asked if I would appear at the Committee for 100, which I'm going to by, I think, a former chair, Ed. Ed Dahl. And he said, will you appear to be against it or for it? I said, no, I'm neither. It's a pilot. We're learning, Ed. We're going to present everything we know, and that's the process. So I thought that'll be very interesting when that comes up. We started these on-street corrals. We have them in several locations on the RB and Route 1 corridors. We have a full list at ridedockless.com, and they're starting to work. They're not perfect. We're trying to get the operators you see below to push their people toward those apps, through their apps to those locations. And it's been pretty interesting. And then, all right, General Assembly, I went backwards, but there are all kinds of issues out there. Speed limits, sidewalk riding, strip the local control. Uber and Lyft want to basically give us no control over our streets and sidewalks. Those were all defeated, those particular. HB 2752 does a pretty good job of clearing up the code and definitions of what they are and establishes some local authority. That passed the House of Delegates 97-0, and you see the rest of that and refer to Senate. However, I think as of today, or maybe late today, I got a note from Pat in Richmond that it appears that Byrd may try to institute an amendment to allow us no control over speed whatsoever. I wouldn't say the jurisdictions are totally in favor of that, but I also wrote to her today that the truth is we don't fully know. This whole point of the pilot was, should it be 15? Should it be 20 for e-bikes? What should it be? And frankly, this is a nationwide issue. They're all looking at it, and we're trying to work with our neighbors in Alexandria, District of Columbia. Fairfax is about, I think, to deploy Lime in Tyson's Corner, so we continue to work with that working group. We'll see what comes out of the General Assembly. I don't know as of this minute. You may know more than I do, but that's all I know right now. So that's kind of a brief summary. This micro subject, they're changing the name of what we do, every day. We started out as shared mobility devices. Now it's micro mobility. In fact, there's a conference I'm probably going to go to if I can get there in Austin on micro mobility and emerging shared use options. And as you probably know, there are a lot of organizations around the country looking into this subject, and we're monitoring all of those and trying to keep track of what's going on. So that's my summary today. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer them. Hi, yes.
I'm not a big fan of it, but actually my latest concern about e-scooters and bikes is the extent to which it's cutting into Metro bus ridership. I know that I am a patron of Metro Bus and Art Bus, and I am concerned that about the documented decline in ridership, and anecdotally the fact that any given day of the week I can board a bus and there's nobody else on it. So I'm wondering to what extent e-bikes and scooters are cutting into bus ridership, and are you attempting to, or is anyone attempting to establish whether that's actually occurring?
The answer is we really don't know, and we're not fully looked into it, but we did discuss this actually this week at our staff meeting, because the other concern, which you didn't mention, which is also a transit option, is capital bike share. And we do feel it's cutting a little bit, not a lot, into capital bike share. So we're monitoring that, and I'm going to go back to Transit Division to discuss that. I think it's a great suggestion. We'll do so.
Commissioner Calkins.
Hi, Hi, thank you for the presentation. Are you guys planning on releasing a kind of like 6-month report like DDOT did on their dockless pilot? I found that very informative, and they actually showed in the district that the dockless scooters and bike shares were additive to Capital Bike Share and not a detractor from that. So if you look on DDOT's webpage, you have to do some digging. It's really, they did a very good job pulling it together and have a ton of great reported data in there. And then my second kind of caveat response to your concern about the lowering bus ridership, and research has really shown that it's the transportation network companies, Uber, Lyft, Via, that are cutting into the metro bus ridership, not just in our region, but nationally. Bus ridership is down, and it correlates specifically and strongly with when these providers enter the markets in the regions.
Thank you. Yes, we're going to look. I'm not sure it's going to be a 6-month report, but I agree with what you just said. It makes a lot of sense. We're a little concerned with we want another month or two, but we are rolling out our formal input sessions to the community in April and May. And preliminarily, I was going to give some kind of preliminary update to the board in probably April. May will be close. And to remind you of the timeline, and it's a bit of a challenge for us, the pilot ends June 30th, but we need, because all the data will not be in, right? We need certainly all of July and August to really figure out what does that all mean, and then have a final report that we intend to publish.
I completely understand that. DDOT's report was only through June, and it got published in December, so there's a lot of data crunching that takes some time to help us inform our decisions, but seeing that data whenever it's available in Arlington will be really helpful just for, I think, people to understand kind of the relationship between Capital Bike Share and then our other transit systems.
We'll definitely do so. Thank you very much.
Commissioner Yeri.
Hi. Thanks for the report tonight. Just one question about the crash data. Do you know where that's coming from? Because we just got a little presentation from Lieutenant Murphy of the ACPD
Yes.
on Monday night, and he said that they had 8 to 9, to his recollection, 8 to 9 filed, basically crash reports that actually explicitly involve.
So these are police and things to e-mobility, so they're not just formal crash reports. So they're not always substantiated. We're recording them, and we're actually trying to break that onto subsections. I'd like to know a little bit more about who's going to emergency rooms, things like that. And we're working with Lieutenant Murphy on the same subject. We've had, I think there's been one modest, well, what's modest? Somebody got hurt. I'm actually meeting with them on Monday just to get their information. It wasn't an official police report. And it was an operator who the rider claimed the brakes failed. He hit a wall, and he had to go by taxi to the hospital and has some arm damage. I'm not an inspector, nor do I understand it, but at least we're going to start the process and, try to explain to him what's going on, see what's going on from that perspective.
Thank you.
Great.
Else? All right. Thank you, Mr. Lentell.
Thank you.
Larson.
Item 4 is the American Legion site plan. And before we get started, we received 2 emails. The first email is from Sharon Valencia, which was sent to you via email this afternoon. And the second email was from the Boston, Virginia Square Civic Association. And you have a hard copy in front of you. And also, I've noticed we have a number of new faces. Perhaps I should talk about speaker slips and how that operates.
That would be great. Thank you, Mr. Best.
Welcome. Now that I see a lot of new faces in the audience, if you'd like to sign up to speak, everyone is welcome. However, you have to fill out a speaker slip. Speaker slips are found at the front table. So with that, I will call the speakers in order that I received these. So thank you. So with that, I will turn this over to the applicant for his presentation.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Best. Commissioner Weinstein.
Thank you, Chairman Slatt. As I said in the November hearing, I am counsel to the applicant, so I must recuse myself to avoid any appearance of a conflict of interest. So I shall leave the room and see you next month.
All right. Thank you.
Same with agenda item number 5, because it directly impacts agenda item number 4. Thank you.
You want me to start? Okay. Hi, my name is Carmen Romero, and I work for the Arlington Partnership for Affordable Housing. Thanks for having me tonight. I'm joined here by our design team as well as our partners at the American Legion. Next slide. So what is our vision of the site? Why are we here? APA has been working in partnership with the American Legion now for a couple years to execute on delivering new affordable units in Arlington County, which we know is undergoing a tremendous crisis in the loss of affordable housing, having lost 85% in the last decade of our existing market rate affordable housing. And APA, along with a couple other nonprofits, our mission is to create more and in perpetuity. Here, on this 1.3-acre site, we're going to develop 160 units of affordable housing. The majority of those, 70%, are 2 and 3 bedrooms for low-income families. But here we're also innovating for the first time. APA is going to put in place a veteran's preference for half the units. So if you're a veteran, you'll be able to have priority in leasing half of those units. We are also doing Earthcraft Gold to promote green and low energy standards, barrier-free ADA units that we're setting aside, as well as universal design units. And we believe this is a great location. It's a multimodal location. So we are also innovating here by reducing the cost of developing affordable housing. It costs $50,000 a unit to develop an underground parking spot in the RB corridor. And that's why you're going to hear a little bit later from my team what we're proposing to do. But we're also co-locating with a new American Legion Post 139, who is reimagining their future. And you're going to hear a little bit from one of our partners there during public comment about what they're planning to do with the condo that's going to be on our ground floor, 6,000 square feet. But first and foremost, what we're committed to is adhering to the special GLEP study principles that were put together during 2016 and 2017 as part of a community process, envisioning, if you go to the next page, this whole area, including the YMCA, as well as what's now being put forward as part of the 11th Street development. There were 15 principles, and you can go to the next one, that were guiding principles to us during our design. We tried to adhere to all of them. But as it pertains to transportation, we were very careful to develop a building that allowed for the connectivity, both pedestrian, bike, vehicular, and allow for the flexibility as the other parties came through with their developments, that we would be compatible with the overall vision for the 3 large parcels, while at the same time allowing APA to move forward with the development of affordable housing in time to meet kind of tax credit application deadlines that are coming up very soon. So with that, I'm going to let our architect start to walk you through the concept.
Steve Saff, Davis Carter Scott. The site plan here, let me get you oriented. North is up. We have Washington Boulevard on the south side, and then you've got the alley running on the west side of the building, running north and south. There is some parking up front along Washington Boulevard, and then you have 3 parking spaces just on the southwest corner of it. And then just right above that, you have the loading dock area, then followed just a little bit north of that by the garage area. And then you see the change in material of the alley. We go to specialty paving, which was a result of our last meeting with SPRC 3. That was a response to trying to make this a much more pedestrian-oriented area rather than vehicular. So we do have 1 parking space on the north side of that, and it'll be more really for infrequent turnaround area. On the west side of the site, on the alley, we do have a 7-foot-high fence that runs along both the single-family home on the south side of 12th North Road, and then a partial running along the house on the northern side. We have a 7-foot-high fence as well. We also, in the specialty paving areas, we have bollards that stop at the specialty paving, and when you get to the sidewalk area, we have those bollards there on the running north-south, and then at the very top running east-west. All right, this is a composite of the site plan and the ground floor plan. Again, Washington Boulevard is on the southern part of the site. As you start moving north, you have the American Legion space, followed by back of house and the loading dock area, which is loading dock for both American Legion and the apartment building. Then as you continue running further north, you have the bike storage area and elevator lobby area just on the east side of that. Then you go to the, just north of that is the ramp running down to the parking garage below grade. And then as you continue running further north, you have the amenities area and entrance to the apartment building. Leasing is nestled in the yellow area there in the middle of the building. And then the blue is some apartments that will be on the ground floor. We also have on the east side of the building, kind of nestled in there, additional amenities area that will be for access to the outdoor courtyard with barbecue areas, playground area, and just breakout space. This is a view from Washington Boulevard, the southwest corner of the building. This gives you a direct view right to the American Legion space. You have 3 large storefront windows running along Washington Boulevard to give you activate the street, give you access views into the American Legion space, and then we have storefront windows running down, south to north along the alleyway to again activate the pedestrian experience there. Ground is all American Legion and amenities and some units. The rest is all residential above it. Predominantly, the building will be a very light white brick with gray brick at the bottom and a cementitious panel system at the top. You have a large cornice that kind of adorns the bottom of the building at the American Legion entrance, which again has entrances both on Washington Boulevard and along the alley. This is a view from the southeast corner. The very upper right image is the American Legion entrance space. So again, you see to the right the doors leading in from Washington Boulevard and another set of doors running along the sidewalk north-south. So you have 2 points of entrance. The bottom image is the southeastern corner of the building, and you see far back, you see a wood fence which is encloses the breakout area for American Legion. You see an American flag image that is a placeholder. Currently, there will be some type of motif that will eventually be there, and we'll work with American Legion to figure out what that will be. This is the top image is the northwest corner of the site. You can see on the very right-hand side that is a 7-foot-high fence that sits along the one of the single-family homes. You see on the left-hand side large windows looking into the amenities area for the apartment building, and then you see 2 floors of residence above that, and the building steps further back. That's in response to the GLUP and the setbacks that were required. The bottom left-hand image is looking near the garage entrance, and you can see just a little bit further up, that would be the entrance into the lobby for the apartment building. You can see to the left of that where the asphalt goes to the specialty paving. You can see the 7-foot-high fence running along the single-family homes, and there is a chain that creates a point because 12th North Road and the alley are visually connected, but you have no vehicular movement between the two. The right-hand corner image is looking directly at the garage. You have 2 garage doors. One will be flush, that is the garage door that comes from cars coming out from the parking garage below grade, and the one that's set back in is the for cars going into the garage. That's one other thing. Above that is the space above the lobby and bike room. That is not going to be a used space. It's just a green roof up there, so that will not be for anybody to go out, so it'll be a non-occupied space. This is just a view looking as you're coming up from the garage. What you see, so as the garage door would, as you come up to the top and you're about to leave, the garage door will roll up and you come out, and that is your view looking to the west.
Hi, good evening. I'm Karen White with Walter Phillips, and I'm going to walk you around the street sections around the project. So right here, you'll see the north alley that we have here, and what we're doing here is we're doing a 9-foot dedication to the county for future right-of-way or future use. We are showing an 11-foot public sidewalk easement, and in that easement, we're going to have a 5-foot landscape strip and 6-foot sidewalk. We're going to plant street trees, or there will maybe eventually be street trees in that 5-foot landscape strip so they could be there for the future. And then we have a 5-foot building zone area between that sidewalk, that public sidewalk, and our building for some plantings, some planters, and things like that. And there's some images, as you can see that on the left there too. Here we have the alley that runs north-south on the west side of the building. So what we're showing here is we're put 2 travel lanes, one in each direction, 11 feet wide, which is a 22-foot width. The fire marshal requires 26 feet in width along this way. So what we have is we have 2 travel lanes in, again, asphalt material, and then we have a 4-foot wide paved, we're calling it just a fire access lane adjacent to that, all that's flush, and that paved area will be a specialty paving that matches the paving at the end of the alley. In that 26-foot wide area, we are dedicating in right-of-way to the county. As you can see, there's a 2-foot wide outlot between that right-of-way dedication and the adjacent property to the left or the west. That's going to be an outlet that will be conveyed to Arlington County. Moving in the other direction towards the building, we have the travel lanes, and we have a 7-foot parking lane where we have 4 parking lanes in the alley proposed, and then we have a 5-foot landscape planter and a 6-foot clear sidewalk up to the building face. And you'll see that all that parking, landscaping, and sidewalk is in a public sidewalk and utility easement. There's been a lot of questions about 12th Road and the interaction with 12th Road. So the fire marshal does require access up our proposed alley and then would turn left down 12th Road just to exit the site whenever it needs to enter. So as you'll see, what we're proposing is 2 bollards, 22 feet apart with a kind of a chain link in between them, so it'd be closed. And the key would be, the fire marshal would have the key, so they would be able to unlock the chain so they could exit the site. But you'll see there is a 5-foot wide pedestrian area between the bollard and the proposed fence that's adjacent to the residential properties, which, sorry, is back on that 2-foot strip I was talking about in the previous section. So there can be pedestrian and bike access to 12th Road from our proposed alley. Washington Boulevard, the travel lanes would remain the same. We are proposing a parking lane, unfortunately only 1 parking space due to our limited frontage, but we're gonna have a 7-foot parking lane, a 6-foot landscape strip, and then a 10-foot clear sidewalk. And you can see the building does overhang the sidewalk a little bit, but it is at least 16 feet clear above the sidewalk. And that's it for me.
Good evening. I'm Dan Van Pelt with Grove Slate Associates. We performed a multimodal transportation assessment for this project. I'm going to walk you through some of the highlights of that and some of the other transportation aspects of our review. This site is located just to the west of the Kirkwood intersection on Washington Boulevard. There is Orange and Silver Line access, Orange and Silver Line service, about 3/10 of a mile away at the Virginia GMU Metro Station, and the Clarendon Metro Station is just a little bit further away, about a 9-minute walk. There's bus service. There are 5 routes on Washington Boulevard. 38B is pretty much right out the front door, with access to Farragut North and the Ballston Metro Station. There's car sharing that spots located at the Virginia Square Metro Station. Transit score gives us a very high score, also similarly for walk score and bike score, and that's located there on the bottom right-hand portion of this image. Next slide. So yeah, walk score 92. I think it's walker's paradise if you want to think of it that way. It's a well-connected bike and pedestrian network here. The image on the right shows all of the destinations in the vicinity of the site that you can walk to. One of them is a full-service grocery store that's immediately across the street. There's parks and other facilities. In our review, most of the sidewalks met ADA and standards that are recommended by the MTP, the Master Transportation Plan. This site will greatly enhance the porosity and connectivity for bikes and pedestrians, as was one of the recommendations from the special club study. It's going to also enhance the sidewalk along Washington Boulevard along the frontage of the property. Speaking a little more about the bike services, there are bike lanes on Kirkwood and on Fairfax Drive. There's the access to the Custis Trail to the north. There's assigned bike routes. Also on Kirkwood 13th and Lincoln, there's access to bike share, and those are the red icons on the image on the right. And then residents of this project will have access to the Capital Bike Share Community Partners Program. One of the things I think that Steve pointed out earlier that's a nice amenity of this project is that there will be bicycle parking at the ground floor level. So I think that's a great amenity to be able to roll your bike in on the ground floor. Next slide. There's a transportation management plan that is proposed for this project. Starts off as all TDM plans do with the transportation coordinator being identified. There will be a contribution to Arlington Commuter Services, $6,900 per year. Each tenant at lease up is going to be also provided a $65 subsidy to be used for either car share, bike share, or smart trip. And then after that initial tenancy, there will be the same amenity offered to residents that do not, up to 90 units, that do, but they cannot take a parking space. So basically, you get a transit, you get that incentive if you do not take a parking space. There'll be real-time information in the project. There'll be display for multimodal information and also given to residents. Price of parking will be unbundled from the unit, and then there'll be annual report on the TDM efforts of the site, and there'll be support for the ongoing transportation monitoring at the site. One of the things that most folks are interested in is the trip generation. The Legion is currently on the site, so those trips are already being generated. So really what we're looking at is the addition of new trips that we proposed, that'll be generated by the proposed residential. The vehicular trips are relatively low, and then you can see the other, as we break it down by mode, the transit, bike, and walking trips. Next slide. This gives our parking plan. So we have 96 spaces on one level. 20 of those spaces will be for the Legion, and then the other 76 would be for the residential. This slide gives the overall unit count and breakdown of the units. Where we are with the 76 residential spaces puts us at about a 0.475 is what the proposed ratio is. We're asking for flexibility, I think based on some conversations with staff, to go down to a 0.43. And that's before any designation of accessible spaces or visitor spaces. But right now the plan has the 0.475. We're just looking for some flexibility, potentially go down to 0.43. I think the one thing is we were looking for guidance on the parking ratio. We are literally, and the next slide actually has that, we're literally across the street from the guidelines that were in the off-street off-street parking guidelines for multifamily that were adopted in 2017. So this guidance doesn't technically apply to us, but as a transportation person, proximity is important. We're literally across the street. So if we were across the street, if this was a market project, that guidance would have us at a 0.3, and then for affordable, it's less, and you can see 0.15 to 0.21. And so we looked at that as guidance as we were thinking about the appropriateness of the parking ratio. We also looked at some of the other guidance from the special, from the GLUP study and the Master Transportation Plan, and feel that we're supporting principles that are in many of the planning documents, county planning documents. So next slide, please. Then the one thing we did too is we looked at comparable sites. I think there, maybe could be some debate on whether these are fully comparable sites or not, but I think APA has a whole portfolio of projects. We felt that we looked at all of them, and then we narrowed it down to five that we felt were probably the most comparable from a transportation amenities standpoint, and so those are what are shown here. We looked at the parking supply at those sites, and then from just a straight average, we're at a 0.79 across those 5 sites. What I'm most interested in is how that parking is being utilized. And so when you look at that across the 5 sites, we are at a 0.51. I think the other thing that is interesting about this is that you look at those 5 comparable sites and none of them are fully utilizing their parking. So we know that research has shown that if you provide it, it's likely to incentivize the demand. So I think we take into account, we have a 0.51 at sites that are not constrained on parking. So that all seems to feel like that in the parking guidance, the parking planning guidance, and the fact that we're going to have a TDM plan where a lot of these sites don't have TDMs. We feel like we're in a pretty good spot in terms of the proposed parking supply and when you take into account all the other transportation amenities afforded the site. So I think with that, that concludes our presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much.
Good evening. Robert Gibson from Transportation Development Services, and I'm here with Rich Viola from Transportation Planning. And we're going to present both items number 4 and 5 together since they are pretty much interlinked. And so let's start at the beginning of the presentation. So there are 3 items associated with the item number 4. A rezoning, a GLUP, and a site plan. Specifically, these areas relate, issues relate to the site shown here in yellow, the American Legion site. It is within the Washington Boulevard, Kirkwood Road Special GLUP Study Plus Concept Plan area, mouthful, that was recently approved by the county board. It generally goes from Lincoln Street on the west to Kirkwood Road on the east, with Washington Boulevard on the south and 12th Road on the north. There are portions of the single-family home neighborhood which are left out of the study area. And this is the first project coming through the actual entitlement process associated with sites within that. And we've had a lot of discussion at the 3 SPRC meetings, and you'll probably be seeing the corner lot here coming through very soon, and then likely followed behind by the YMCA property to the north. As you can see, the site's just about 1,250 feet from the Virginia Square Metro. It's also an easy walk to the Clarendon Metro if you like that stop better. So some specifics about the site, some of the basic planning stuff. The project site area today is 58,250 square feet, approximately 1.3 acres of site area. There is a split GLUP on the site today. The southern half is service commercial and the northern half is semi-public. And then the zoning is also split with C2 on the southern half and R5 on the northern half. The existing development is a 1-story American Legion post surrounded by surface parking, some grass area and picnic areas. And the American Legion post was originally constructed in 1959. The proposed development will actually reduce the site area, and I have a typo, I'm sorry. It'll reduce it by about 10,000 square feet associated with fee dedications for the right-of-way along the western side and the right-of-way along the northern side. And so they'll get a one-time credit for that in association with this, this project. The GLUP is proposed to be changed to medium office apartment hotel. The zoning is proposed to be changed to CO 2.5 mixed-use density, mixed-use district, excuse me. And the specifics of the proposed development are 160 residential units, approximately 185,000 square feet of residential GFA associated with that, 6,750 square feet of commercial GFA for the Legion post at the front of the site. It's a 7-story building at approximately 83 feet in height. The proposal is for an Earthcraft Gold project. There are 90 to 96 parking spaces depending on how it gets configured, and we'll talk about that a little bit more because this is unusual for us to be talking about a range in this manner. And they're split between 70 to 76 residential spaces, which is a 0.43 parking ratio, and a 20 spaces for the commercial area, which is roughly 1 to 380 if you look at it as typical retail. The applicant's done a very nice job of talking about some of these uses. The project has seen some changes as we went through the SPRC process, and I'd like to just highlight some of them. Originally, the garage entrance was at the rear of the site. That's been pushed down to roughly the middle of the block. It is still adjacent to the single-family homes, and that's been an issue with how the lights coming out of that garage may affect the single-family houses to the west. There's also been questions about what happens when you put a new road right next to single-family designated homes. So you heard about that 2-foot conveyance to the county. That is not a right-of-way conveyance, that's an actual property conveyance. And that is intended to keep the adjacent properties conformant with the zoning regulations so they don't become a corner lot. So it's a bit of a trick, and when, especially when the casual adventure to the west develops, we expect that 2 feet to be dedicated as right-of-way, but the county would be able to do that without any issues as we would own the right-of-way. One of the other issues is what type of streets and pedestrian, bike, vehicular connections should be part of this plan. These were all envisioned as part of the special GLUP study, and we'll go into some detail on that. And I think I have my issues out of order, but nope. So here we go. This is the connectivity and future street diagram from the plan. And some interesting things that were shown. Everything was very conceptual. There are no street cross sections. There's no specifics about exactly where things need to go in the plan, so it leaves a lot up to the site plan process. But generally what we have is 2 vehicular connections coming off of Washington Boulevard, going to the north, connecting to a new east-west vehicular connection that cuts through the middle of the study area, and then 1 new vehicular connection that goes north-south to 12th. Some interesting points about this plan that, we love connectivity, but when we talk about things with neighbors, we make a compact to some extent on what the plan should look like. And so one of the issues here has been the 12th Road connectivity. And so when this was approved, it was approved with the designation of a ped bike connection only, not a vehicular connection. And so we'll have some more discussion about that. And then there's a couple other points that are important to how we achieve the streets with multiple buildings, or multiple parcels developing over time. So there's a goal to split the right-of-way responsibilities when we're looking at sort of shared parcels on the project. And so we'll talk about that in a little bit. And then the county board threw a little curveball at the approval and recommended that these yellow areas should be designated as either alleys, shared streets, or pedestrian priority streets. We'll have more discussion on our recommendations there. That's been a very big challenge for us in both the design and the operation of those streets. But on to discussing first the east-west connection. One of the challenges with some of this is that the east-west connection isn't really known yet because a lot of its design, use, the fronting, how future development will front it, is going to be delivered with the YMCA plan. So there's a huge gap of unknowns. And so what we did in the process to ensure that the Legion would be delivering enough right-of-way to support multiple future options, we looked at some cross-sections and presented them to SPRC. The largest cross-section, a 50-foot cross-section from building face to building face or park face, could support an urban center local street or shared street, providing 2 travel lanes in each direction, street trees on both sides, and sidewalks on both sides, and then a 5-foot buffer along the American Legion site. Though under an alley scenario, you could actually have a smaller 40-foot building face to building face, and in that case, only 15 feet of additional space might be needed from the Y to support 2 travel lanes, a sidewalk on the Y side, and then keeping the 5-foot planting strip, sidewalk, and buffer on the American Legion site. So as looking at these scenarios, we feel that the project is not precluding any future development and is supporting it through appropriate dedications and construction of infrastructure that is appropriate at this time. This is one more showing the condition that is proposed until the Y develops, which is the 9-foot interim planting, the street tree zone, the sidewalk, and the buffer. And so that finishes the discussion on the east-west, and now I'm going to move into the north-south connection. The applicant has called it all along an alley, and we are here to give it a name. And so we are recommending that the alley in the applicant's plan be put on the MTP and it be identified as North Kansas Street. That fits with the rhythm of the county's street naming process. There is no North Kansas Street today, which connects to Washington Boulevard. So we feel it's the appropriate name based on the streets in the area. And what we're looking at in the applicant's present proposal is basically a 47-foot section from the face of building to the property line that supports a travel lane in each direction, a 4-foot area that will help support fire access, on-street parking, trees, and a sidewalk, along with the 2-foot buffer that we talked about. There are some design changes to our typical street design that you'll see here. One, normally when you turn off a road onto another street, you don't have to go over a curb. We're proposing that this have more of a driveway entrance than a street entrance, and the sidewalk will continue flush across that grade, giving pedestrians priority along Washington Boulevard. The asphalt is going to be relatively at grade with the sidewalk and the street tree planting, so it will have, while it will be asphalt, it will have a bit more of a shared street feel to it with everybody at the same level. One of the biggest challenges associated with North Kansas Street is that it needs to support high-rise fire access or mid-rise fire access for this project. And so It does need that 26 feet of clear space, which makes some of the road design a little bit more challenging. We can't push it in to make it feel more shared street. It's going to function from this building. It's going to have relatively low traffic volumes. In the future, it's going to support the development of the casual adventure site, and depending on what the YMCA proposal is, it may support vehicular egress from that site also. So one thing that we did do to address some of the concerns was because the area north of the garage for this project will see virtually no vehicle traffic. There's no other connections. We're not proposing a connection to 12th Road. We're proposing that be actually built out a lot more like a shared space. So it will have a specialty paver. It's still at grade. And this is all consistent with the vision of the Special GLUP Study Plus. One of the other challenges, just to step back, I'm sorry, about the southern segment is that it will ultimately be incorporated with the signal at Founders Way. So the signal which is on the Casual Adventure parking lot today will be moved over and signalize this street. And so because of that, we're very concerned about calling it a shared street at this location. Signals really designate who has priority and where they have priority. And so we're actually going to be recommending that the street have a split designation halfway through the block from an urban center local street to a shared street. And we'll talk more about that in the MTP map designation. So another issue that we've looked at and heard a lot about, you've got some letters about the concerns, is really the 12th Road, existing 12th Road North issues, how development in this block will possibly change the use of that or affect that use. And so this is 12th Road North. It's about 250, 260 feet from Lincoln to the property line. It is a quaint little street. It supports about 13 houses. Really, it supports the vehicle traffic for just about those 13 houses only. If it had a different material other than asphalt on it, it would look, feel, operate, and be a shared street. It does not have sidewalks today. It doesn't have curb and gutter today. And as you can see, the fence line at the end of it is a nice planted terminus to the street. It's so narrow that actually it is one way westbound after existing Kansas. So it currently operates, it doesn't even operate as a two-way street for most of it. Some of the challenges with being such a quaint, narrow street, which make it nice for walking, biking, and moving around, make it difficult for our fire and emergency access. And so there's always challenges on these small streets of making sure that we can, regardless of what happens adjacent to these areas, we can provide emergency service to them. So regularly our fire trucks will drive through, and if they can't get through, the county may get a request to look at how to address parking on streets like this. But that is regardless of the conditions that are being proposed in this project. But what is proposed in this project is a new terminus to that street, and that would be with bollards and chain to keep it limited to fire access. We don't expect that this condition will actually be there in perpetuity. As the block develops out, I would expect this to get reconfigured into possible plantings or bench or something that is more supportive of the community than this fire egress. But until the rest of the transportation network gets delivered around the site, We do have to have fire egress here. They can't turn around. They get too far into the block. We have looked at and discussed with the YMCA property the ability to potentially temporarily egress through the YMCA site, that there are both vertical challenges with the way the grades match and challenges with the way the parking lot can frankly fill up and then cause challenges for the fire trucks to get out and change the operation of that site. We would need an easement for that. We've asked. This is not something that they're looking at providing until the site redevelops. And we'll get into questions on that. The third and final major issue that we're going to discuss is the reduced parking. And we went through a very extensive community process to look at the residential parking within our designated metro corridors. And it turns out this site is just outside of that designated metro corridor. The study explicitly does not include areas outside of it, even though it was a sort of a ring-based analysis for distance from metro to figure out what the ratios should be. And staff would love some recommendations to the board on how to apply this elsewhere when, in cases like this, when it's appropriate. We're providing this as informational here and does not represent our recommendation for why this parking ratio is appropriate. But in that analysis, what we see, though we are integrating 3 of the proposals in the recommendations, and those relate to visitor parking, the TDM, and the ADA parking for the type 1 accessible units in the project. And so when you look at it, excuse me, the reason why we have a range of spaces here is because physically the garage that we see today can provide 76 spaces, but if we were to convert additional spaces to support residents in the ADA accessible units, we would want to convert some of those standard spaces into ADA spaces. It's easy to do with banks of 3. You turn 3 into 2, but you lose technically 1 parking space. So we're giving the zoning administrator flexibility to do that on a case-by-case basis. This way, if there isn't a need for the ADA spaces, we can keep as much parking on site as possible. So that the ratio, if all of it goes to ADA, is at 0.38, and that's what correlates to the table up here because you back out 0.05% for visitor parking. So we're requiring the 0.05, the 0.38, you get to an added number of 0.43, which the applicant talked about. So if you guys have discussion and want to provide the board on any information on how to apply that, that's helpful for staff. But what we really are looking at is the county policies, since that was not the direct reasoning for doing this. And one of the most significant MTP policies is in our parking and curb space management element, specifically policy 11, reduce or eliminate parking requirements for specialized projects near transit nodes when they advance related county transportation goals, such as lowering the cost of transit proximate housing dedicated to those who cannot afford a private vehicle, make available underground spaces for new metro entrances or for retail at transit stops. But we're really focusing on that first clause in there, which is it is a county goal to lower the cost of transit proximate housing for people who do not need a private vehicle. So some factors in that. When you read the entire section about this, the term near is generally referred to within a half mile. This site is within a half mile of the Virginia Square Metro station. The site is providing 160 units of committed affordable housing, which average at 60% AMI. This is an incredible benefit to our community. It goes a long way in advancing our, I believe it's our promise. And so as you hear about affordable housing in the county delivering that, transit and affordable housing and the ability to reduce parking and cost of that affordable housing will be a continued and ongoing issue in the future. The project does include a transportation demand management plan. In your reports, that's condition 41. The applicant talked about some of the enhanced benefits for residents without vehicles. So when we look at the three items, the zoning, the GLUP, the zoning, and the site plan, we recommend that you recommend to the county board to adopt the attached resolution, amending the GLUP to medium office apartment hotel. And then we also recommend that you recommend to the county board attached ordinance to rezone the site to CO 2.5 and adopt the ordinance for the site plan and the conditions, plans and conditions which are attached. Just very quickly on the MTP amendments, as we said, there's three elements of the MTP amendment that we're looking at. One, the name of, well, first adding it to the map. It's going in an area envisioned for new streets, and this action will add it to the map. We recommend that it be named North Kansas Street. And then we talked about the split designation, and we are getting colorful on our maps these days. And so we have both a dot pattern for the shared street, which is the northern segment, and then the teal urban center local for the southern portion. And we talked about the cross sections and some of the reasons why the county is recommending an urban center local designation, which is contrary to the special GLUP study, but we feel that it's warranted based on the design and operation of that segment of the road. But we do support the shared street designation for the northern portion. We envision that this portion may be reconsidered with future redevelopment, and its classification may be further studied or changed in the future depending on what would happen with the YMCA site. So it's until that redevelops, it's very easy to say that this is a shared space, but it may need to change in the future. And so we recommend to you to recommend to the county board to adopt the attached resolution to approve an amendment to the MTP plan map as shown in figure 1, adding a new segment of North Kansas Street north of Washington Boulevard. And thank you. I'll open it to public comment.
Thank you, Mr. Gibson. Mr. Best, do we have public speakers on this item?
We have 7 speakers for this item. The first speaker is Bill Fahey.
Thank you. I moved to Arlington when I was in my 20s. I'm now in my 70s, so I've been here a little while. I'm a member of the American Legion, and I've held the two highest offices at the post. One of the accomplishments or efforts that we want to make with the American Legion is to try to provide counseling, benefits, and whatever we can do for veterans. I wrote a letter to St. Louis trying to inquire whether I was eligible for a benefit. The person that received my letter wrote back to me and said, well, I need A, B, and C. Well, A, B, and C was located 3 offices down the hall from the guy that authored the letter. So he wants to write to me from St. Louis here in Arlington, so I write back to the guy 3 doors down the hall from him, so he can send it back to me to Arlington so I can send it back to his office mate. Our veterans deserve better. Are there any veterans up here? Am I allowed to do that? I don't know. Thank you. We have an application for you. We anticipate holding events there ranging from children's birthday parties, Santa Claus, retirement parties, and the like. I'm often asked, why did we pick APA? Well, what many of you, or probably all of you, don't know is that my career was developing affordable housing. I've developed developer syndicated 34 affordable housing properties in 9 states. My underwriting required that I be able to build an apartment unit for a dollar amount equal to the median income for that area, or I didn't build it. It didn't make sense to me. It was too hard. Which of these cities has the highest median income? New York City, Los Angeles, or Wichita, Kansas? It's Wichita. Where did I build? Because I can charge the same rent in all 3 cities. And I can build for half the price in Wichita that I can in the other 2 cities. The dominoes work. The median income in Arlington is almost $120,000. This property is going to cost $440,000 a unit. You have to be insane to develop affordable housing here. I just hope that this county appreciates the miracle that they have in having APA in this community doing what they do. I can't tip my hat enough to them. And I am proud that the American Legion is tying their kite string to APA. They did what I would never even try to do. The American Legion, this post, is so thrilled with having APA as a partner that we're taking over half of our net cash proceeds from this transaction and lending it back to this endeavor at below market rate interest rate. We're putting our money where our mouth is, and these are 2 nonprofits working together. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And our next speaker is Nikki Toner.
Hi, I'm Nikki Toner, and I am a resident and homeowner on 12th Road. And I'm just coming tonight to say I'm not anti-development. I just want to make sure that what's happening to our quaint little street, as Robert described, works for our neighborhood. So particularly the neighbors in close proximity that are going to have a new street right next to their bedroom windows. My concerns are the connection between the new property and 12th Road and how that's going to look long term. I know for temporary we're going to have the bollards with the chain, which isn't ideal, but hopefully it will keep some of the vehicular traffic out. I'm also concerned about the increase in traffic through the neighborhood just from construction and also from the residents when they move in, not only the residents but the guests. So hopefully we can work on some restricted parking hours. I'm also concerned about with the egress happening that we may lose some parking on one side of the street. The street is very narrow as it is. It's not in great shape. It does need some repairs. So I would like to make a plea that we could get some road improvements at some point as part of the plan. And this is the first project out of 3 major projects right in our neighborhood. So we are going to be living through years of inconvenience and construction and just disturbance and throw us a bone. Don't forget about 12th Road and how quiet and quaint it was when we moved there. So just want to make sure everybody is on the lookout and keeping that as neighborhood friendly as it can be. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Toner.
And our next speaker is Tad Lunger.
Good evening, Chairman Slatt and members of the commission. My name is Tad Lunger. I'm an attorney with McGuire Woods here on behalf of the Arlington YMCA. the central property owner in the Kirkwood study, as you can see. First, I'd like to articulate our support of achieving affordable housing in the Virginia Square and Clarendon neighborhoods. It's a very rare opportunity to find a new site to actually increase the number of ADUs in these very competitive real estate submarkets, and this opportunity should not be missed. We would also like to articulate our support for the flexible interpretations given thus far to the suggestions made in the Washington Kirkwood study when applied to APA's site plan application. However, there are a few items that need to be addressed tonight relating to transportation. These are mostly applicable to the evolution of the east-west connections through APA's property, our property, and 11th Street's property, which is cumulatively the whole block. The reason we raise these issues tonight is to try and ensure that the overall goals of the Kirkwood study are achieved and that any issues be coordinated and resolved by all three property owners and county staff as each individual site plan application is evaluated so that no singular property owner is unduly burdened. Hopefully, a lot of this you already understand if you were able to read our explanatory letter before this hearing tonight. Next slide. As you can see from the circulation map, the suggested vehicular, pedestrian, and bicycle transportation system options for the block are articulated visually, and the notes provide considerable flexibility in the ultimate coordinated design of this network of connections. Next slide. And as you can see from the building form map, consistent with the suggestions made on the circulation map, there's a central east-west connection generally located mid-block. As you can also see, shifting the location of the western segment of this connection north, if it were to be a vehicular route, it would be located with an open space in the Kirkwood study and would forego the opportunity to expand that open space by acquiring the last remaining single-family home east of Kansas Street, if that were something the property owner was interested in doing. Could you go to Exhibit A? There you go. So this is what's actually happening. So as you can see from Exhibit A, what has happened during the first two site plan application design processes is that APA, in order to utilize the northern portion of its site to create enough affordable housing to be competitive and have a successful project, they've requested to move the western road segment north and 11th Street development, in order to move their project forward at a reasonable pace, has needed to shift the eastern road segment south. The result being that these two road segments no longer align. In fact, with the topography and the significant change in direction required to connect these two segments, it may be that these two segments may have to be joined via a bicycle and pedestrian network rather than a full vehicular travelway, in addition to those uses as we have emphasized in our letter to you. Again, we do support the liberal and flexible interpretation of the Kirkwood study recommendations and the flexible application to the two first site plans, but we do ask that the same flexibility be afforded to the YMCA when it has to design around a situation it did not create. Our other equitable requests are contained in our letter to you for the record, and we hope you make these requests part of your discussion tonight. Thank you.
Thanks. And our next speaker is Henry Staples.
How are y'all? I'm representing BVSCA. Collier Cook, our president, couldn't be here tonight. I'm Henry Staples. I was sitting at the table for the SPRC, so I'm well versed in the issues. I'll go through four of them fairly quick from our letter that we sent, and then I'll go more into the parking ratio. The first one is with the temporary egress with the YMCA. What we're looking to, as you can imagine, is that we're looking to protect the 12th Road, Kansas area. And given that any box call to the building will send 4 fire engines, we're pretty sure that one of the large ones will come out 12th Road, and thus they'll ask for the parking to be removed. And so what we're asking for is, again, broach that conversation with the Y to see if there's some sort of temporary egress out into their parking lot in the interim until the road wraps around and the fire truck can leave as planned. We're not saying get rid of the entrance to 12th Road, but rather have the one into the YMCA as the primary egress out, as the fire trucks cannot back out down onto Washington Boulevard at that point. On North Kansas Street, this new section to it, we're glad to see the pavers section come in there and give this pedestrian view to it. But we feel like even though it reads as a pedestrian area, that it will still become something of a shared services drop-off with cars coming back there to turn around and idle. And so our request is to instead move all vehicular traffic for now down and stop it at where the garage parking entrance is. And I know there's a concern with the turnaround and how that would work, and we hope that we could work that out so that it can happen, with the understanding that this is a plaza for now, but if the road wraps all the way around, then it would become car accessible through there, or whatever's dreamed up long-term with it. But for now, we'd like it to stop right at the garage entrance. Along the same lines with this, we're requesting that an RPP study be done before the building goes into place, with the effect of, I'm sure there's plenty of properties already out there that can be used to understand how the neighboring areas get affected by the parking ratios, and whether zone hours should be increased. And we don't have it in here, but we do have, and I'm sure you've seen plenty of them, other increased zone hours for Zone 6. We're currently at 8 to 5, which was mainly for people going over to businesses along the corridor there. And instead, we're recommending something like a 8 to 10 or an 8 to 1 or something, so it keeps the parking spots open for people coming back to their houses. But all we're asking for is just kick off a study so they can do their thing in RPP and see what happens. Another one, we're looking to limit the garage headlights. I know the applicant said it wasn't, it shouldn't happen, but we really would like to get that studied further. There's 2 houses directly out of it that are affected. And then finally, on the limited parking mitigation, the applicant put in a 0.46 ratio, and at the back of the document, we took the time to go through those different properties and say which ones would be applicable for this and which ones weren't. And then we also added in several other properties that were similar to it. And we also added a chart down there with their walk scores. And what you see is it's not a 0.46. If you look around quickly, you see it's like the Springs. It's very similar to the Springs in its feel. And in fact, the Springs being a little bit further away from the metro, but it has so many more buses over there. That is more connected to Arlington than this property. And so what we're feeling for these 90 spaces, they're only giving $60 per month. And they're giving up, Arlington County, if they agree to it, $4 million worth of development. And we're saying, find a bigger number to encourage these people to switch over, to incentivize them to use the car sharing services. Ooh, close one, thank you.
Our next speaker is Mike Tupper.
So I don't have any notes. I just showed up, just came down. Want to say, I don't want your jobs. It looks like hell trying to convince us that this is a good deal. So I know you're doing your job to the best of your ability. I appreciate it. Lots of us have hard jobs. I know it's probably not super easy to be you either, to have proponents and grumpy folks who live on the street. I live right across the street from those two over there. Henry and Nikki just taught Nikki, her husband, and her 7-year-old daughter, Charlie, to rock climb. That's what I do. A couple things. An observation, a fact, an observation, and a suggestion. So here's a fact. I live there with Jill, who's got her head down right now, and 2 dogs 34, 36, 12th Road North. Great place. We love it. Walk score, off the charts. We walk everywhere. In fact, when we first got there, we parked one of our cars and left it parked for so long, the license expired. And we moved from New Mexico, so we had to go write a letter to get our car reinstated as it wasn't stolen. So we love living there. When we first got there, we got an offer to buy our house every month in the mail, or a flyer, or a phone call. Sometimes it would come with a $50 gift certificate for wine. Really awesome. But what's happened now in the last 10 months? Not a single person is interested in purchasing our house. So this has an effect. So that's all the facts I just want to throw out there. All that's true. The second is an observation. There are 3 separate plans being described in the 3 separate building developments being described, and they all touch. It's in the same block, right? It's all in the GLUP. If that was the federal government doing that, you'd be sued for segmentation, and you'd lose. Because we're all going to go to the same grocery stores, we all need the same parking spots, we're all going to go to the same metro. And when you segment a large planning area into discrete pieces, it's easier to get your discrete pieces passed. And I appreciate that. Oh, I'm out of time? Is that it? 30 seconds, okay. So I wish you'd reconsider maybe shrinking the size of some of the establishments that are going to be built so that the parking areas, the congestion for people who are going to come visit, the veterans, won't try to park in front of our house and make Jill or Nikki or any of us grumpy. That's all. Thanks for your time. Appreciate it.
Our next speaker is Dan Donahue.
Good evening. My name is Dan Donahue. I'm an officer at the American Legion Post 139 and have been a member of the post for more than 30 years. Moved to Arlington in 1964 after being discharged from the Marines and raised my family here. As you can imagine, I've seen Arlington and the surrounding area change a lot. Change has also come to what veterans are looking for in Legion posts. The activities I looked for 30 years ago were different from those the World War II vets had wanted. Veterans of today, from conflicts in the Middle East, are looking for even more different activities and support. Our post hopes to continue supporting the older veterans as well as the newer comrades, but our space is obsolete. We have a large lot that really wasn't of benefit to the community. So the opportunity to partner with APA and create affordable housing and get a new, albeit smaller, Legion post is a good idea for us. Another thing I've seen change over time are transportation needs and aspirations. Back when I was first looking for a house in the 60s, our realtor showed us one out in Manassas and cheerfully told us that they were going to build I-66 right over there and we could zip into Washington and zip right back out. Well, so much for zipping. and I'm always glad we chose Arlington. But now we are trying to de-emphasize car use, and that's a good thing. Right now, there is no connection across our block from 13th Street North to Washington Boulevard, and there should be one. That is why I support the proposed north-south connection, as well as the proposed east-west connection be constructed for pedestrians and cyclists and scooters and fire trucks when and if they're needed, and not for through automobile traffic. I know portions of those thoroughfares need to carry some loading traffic for the new buildings as well as vehicles to their garages, but that should be it. We can dedicate the space that would accommodate a small neighborhood street, but we should construct them to act as fire lanes for pedestrians and cyclists and not cars. After the full block is built out and traffic studies are done, we can be revisited and see if that needs to be changed. Right now, the traffic light at the western end of our property on Washington Boulevard serves cyclists and pedestrians from the block immediately to our south. The George Mason block will never have an automobile street through it. So any through street in our block will never connect to anything but 13th Street. And the route of such a street is going to be circuitous at best, as you saw from the presentation a little minute ago. Traffic should be directed onto the arterial streets, not the neighborhood streets. Thank you for your time.
And our final speaker for this item is Jean Atwell.
Good evening, everyone. I'll probably keep mine a little bit shorter than a lot of the other ones that have come through. As mentioned, I'm James. I'm a pretty new resident to Arlington. I've only been here 7 months, but I wanted to come to the meeting and show my support for the American Legion APA project. Even in 7 months, I've noticed that Arlington as a city is growing incredibly quickly, so I think it's more crucial now to make sure that everyone from whatever financial background they're from gets to call it home. It's also an incredibly walker-friendly city. I don't have a car here. I get everywhere using public transport or I walk. And the American Legion Post is perfectly situated for that. It's, as mentioned, it's close to bus routes and metro routes. But more than that, for families with children, it's a 5-minute walk to Quincy Park. There is a supermarket across the street. That's incredible. And the public transport links will encourage residents or future residents in this site to live healthier lives, greener lives, which ultimately benefit everyone. I think this project would be a real asset to the city. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Atwell.
And that concludes our speakers.
All right. Thank you to everyone who came and spoke. I appreciate all of your input. I'm sure the commission will have lots of questions for the applicant and for staff and discussion. Who wants to kick things off? Commissioner Clement.
Yes, I want to make a motion. And the motion is that the Transportation Commission accept the recommendation of the staff with respect to this project, provided that staff commit to street improvements consistent with the use of 12th Street for access and egress of emergency vehicles.
I don't hear a second. So the motion fails. Does anyone want to start things off with questions? If not, I will. Commissioner Calkins.
So I'm going to first start off saying that I think this is an absolutely amazing project. I am so excited to have this coming to my neighborhood. I live in Ballston. I walk this area all the time when I go to Giant or Clarendon. And the fact that we're providing affordable housing that's accessible to neighborhood amenities and transit and really in the heart of what is some of the priciest real estate in Arlington is just completely amendable, and it makes me very excited to be on the commission when this is coming to us. But I also appreciate there's single-family homes right next door, and we're in an urban area, so change is going to happen. One of the comments that the Ballston Civic Association had was a question about whether or not the chain could be moved farther back down your driveway to the garage entrance, as opposed to being at 12th Street. And I was wondering if there's, to block it, and whether or not that was something that we could do so that they wouldn't have as many concerns about headlights turning around at night at the end of the cul-de-sac, for lack of a better term.
So we've had a number of discussions with the fire marshal on this. So there's two reasons that chain is important. So first, well, yeah, I know. I'll get to that. The first reason is it keeps traffic from 12th going somewhere else. So we need something at the end of 12th. The next question is, can we put a chain that crosses North Kansas Street north of the garage entrance? And our fire marshal had a lot of concern about that, as that is the primary access route for them. They do not want to have to unlock the chain for their first service. They don't mind unlocking the chain to egress. So that was the challenge. We've looked at, can you make it narrower? Are there things that you can do? I think that the applicant's recommendation to remove parking, or the neighborhood's request to remove parking is one option that's out there, so there's something less attractive at that end. But then there's limited as far as barriers that we can put in.
Commissioner Evans.
Sorry, can you help me understand why there's a need to control traffic from 12th Street coming that way?
That's mainly to be consistent with the plan. So we're trying to abide by what the plan guidance was in that regard.
So I'm very concerned by the YMCA's comments about the amount of right-of-way being dedicated versus the potential cross-sections we may need for an east-west connector. The cross-sections that you showed, some of them had 10-foot travel lanes, some of them had 11-foot travel lanes, and yet it sounds like APA is discussing only dedicating 9 feet of right-of-way. Can you talk more specifically about whether we're getting, how achievable a vehicular east-west cross-section is with what APA is talking about dedicating at the north end of this parcel?
And so they're dedicating two things. They're dedicating 9 feet of easement for future street, and then they're dedicating 11 feet of sidewalk easement. So in total, it's a 20-foot dedication. We don't know what the Y's needs are going to be, but as we said, we do feel that the dedication that they're providing the Legion is going to be able to support a wide range of different types of streets. So if you just had, say, a little Woonerft shared street through here, the right-of-way could be they could lead as little as 15 additional feet. If the community wanted maybe large sidewalks adjacent to open space, or there needed to be additional room to support turning vehicles to serve their buildings, they may need a little bit more space. And so we think that this is the right balance without knowing exactly what's to come.
Thank you. Commissioner Lantelmi.
I think the design of the street and having it in those two different typologies goes a long way to discouraging traffic from going all the way to the end and just ending at the garage. I'm wondering if we could design it even further to have it read less as a street, even though vehicles could go ahead on it, and certainly the fire trucks. Something like the where you have pavers with grass growing between them, so it reads almost as a lawn, yet it has the full support for vehicles on it. You know, again, it would be interim until a decision is made on the east-west alley and how that looks, but it could go a long way to give what we need for access, yet read as something other than a vehicular street.
So one of the things that we've heard from our fire guys is that all these fire access areas need to get plowed, and the ring grasscrete areas, when they get plowed, have a tendency over a period of time to start pulling up and getting damaged and destroyed. So we're concerned about using that material choice. We think the brick pavers is actually a good sort of in between. One of the reasons we feel that that's important to use pavers here is we think that it's a material that has a high likelihood of being what the future roadway in the block might be. What we've heard from the Y is concerns that they'll have additional infrastructure costs and things like that. So we've tried to pick a material choice and design that can be built upon and doesn't have to be ripped out and paid for new construction.
Can you speak to some more to why staff is recommending urban center local for the section of North Kansas that abuts Washington Boulevard against what's laid out in the plan?
So I think there are 3 reasons that we really have had a lot of challenge with it. The first reason is that it is right there at the signal. The second reason is that the width of the roadway isn't a tight, confined space, so that there's a lot of room where you don't expect people to be. these urban center local streets in our, or I'm sorry, the shared streets in our more urban areas work a lot better when there's a real critical mass of pedestrians and almost an imbalance of vehicular traffic. And given the land use and the densities here, we don't see that disproportionate use. So you may have very low vehicle traffic and relatively low pedestrian traffic. And so you may not, if you are operating in that space, you may not see a car or a pedestrian very often, but then your expectation is that that's what happens, and you end up with a conflict with a car and a person trying to be in the same space at the same time, which is not ideal. And so that's, I think, a big consideration for us. If this street could have been smaller because of fire access issues, we might have had a very different answer to this question. But 26 feet is just, it's too big for the amount of pedestrian traffic that we're gonna see, we think. So I'll turn it over to the commission.
Commissioner Calkins.
Makes me have a follow-up question. Is the area north of the garage as narrow as it can be to still meet fire standards? I also understand that we want to design it and construct it in such a way that it's, you know, able to transition. Are there maybe temporary, like, plantings or planter boxes that could go into, you know, artificially narrow it to the fire truck requirements, but not so wide that it looks like a turnaround for a pizza delivery guy or something along those lines? Have we looked? I know, I'm sorry, I brought it back. I brought it back. Are there opportunities for us to look at kind of ways to use tactical urbanism in a new design to temporarily narrow that feeling so we don't have that issue with turning vehicles?
So I think the only area that we have an opportunity there is with that parking space. And there may be some things that we can do when we really get down to the fine engineering level, and we I think would be committed to looking at that in more detail to see that, one, you can get a car out of there if it ends up back there, but doesn't have so much space that it's encouraging that.
Commissioner Lantalmy.
Following on, it doesn't mean that it wouldn't be wide. It could be visually look narrow, even though you could drive on it. Like, you could have a fake curb. It's you know, like a strip of concrete that is flat with the pavers and whatever's on the other side. It looks like a curb, but it really isn't, because you could roll right over it and you wouldn't notice it. But visually, it would come across as a narrower street. Even at where the garage entrance is, you could have a curb go from the west side of the street, curve right over to the entrance, so it looks like that's where the road goes, even though, again, it's completely flat and you could roll right over it. It's all visual. It's not, you know, it doesn't impede anything physically, but visually it reads as though the street ends and you have to curve into the garage, or that the street is very narrow and you really shouldn't go over there, even though you easily could. It's the Woonerf trick. And I think we could be very creative in something like this to show how it could work. And it could be left permanent. I think that, you know, what you said, that you want to have something that once the alley is decided, you could still leave that in place. Well, this could still be left in place. And it would read, but it would read, this isn't the best place to drive.
I think those are all design considerations that we can advance, and would be happy to advance. Maybe changing see if we can change the color of the pavers to add sort of some visual narrowing. Your idea of the concrete banding to sort of better delineate that transition without adding any sort of vertical elements certainly is something that we can work with the applicant on.
Question for the applicant. Can you walk me through the TDM program here? If I decide that I don't want a parking space at this development, what do I get instead? Exactly. What are my options?
Yeah, so we have, that one's not working. Hello. Yes, so at lease sign-up, we give a Smart Trip card of $65 to everyone who signs a lease at an APA property the first time. And then from there on out, based on folks that do not have a parking space in the garage, they are also eligible for, if you go back to slide, an annual subsidy of a preloaded $65 Smart Trip card if you elect to not have a car in future years, up to 90 households.
So that's, and you said annual subsidy, so that's $65 a year in transit benefit.
Right, it's not a month.
Commissioner Price.
Question also on the TDM. I remember seeing in the presentation first. Well, before I even get to that, thank you. I think this project is amazing. I applaud you for doing it. Thank you to the Legion. Thank you to APA.
Thank you.
It's a good project. Just someone has to explain to me why. I thought I saw somewhere $6,900 a year is being donated to Arlington Commuter Services. That doesn't make any sense to me. For a nonprofit that is dedicated to providing low-income housing, why are we donating?
Well, we would welcome relief, obviously, so I will.
Someone has to explain that one to me. No, even from the county's perspective, someone has to explain that to me. Why is that part of this? That's $43 a unit.
So I'm not going to debate the validity of the nonprofit use, but I can tell you what it does go for, and Jim would have been much better to say it, your previous speaker. But that does pay for all of the services. So we do make sure that there are materials for these buildings. We do make sure that they have access to our service for trip planning, and so I think that at some of APA's buildings, and correct me if I'm wrong, you guys have had the mobility, the mobile commuter vehicles come in and help people identify what the best and economical transit options are for them. That's part of the solutions. I'm going to leave it at.
Well, great. I would encourage the county, and if Arlington Commuter Services is watching this, I would highly recommend not accepting that. Thank you.
Commissioner Evans.
For the shared street portion of it, are there other similar designations elsewhere in Arlington? What comes to mind for me is in the Columbia Pike development, there's kind of a similar area that's not recommended for vehicular use, but it doesn't go anywhere, so cars don't really use it. But are there other areas that already have this decorative pavement as an example of how pedestrians and cars end up sharing that space?
You want me to jump in? So there have been a few places where we have designated shared street types. We haven't yet seen any of those built. Those are generally in Pentagon City and Roslyn and such. And what you're referring to along the Columbia Pike and some of the neighborhood areas, those could be very similar to what we would see here too.
Okay, thank you. Also,
can I also add, one of the other challenges is that those areas have a slightly different use mix than this one right here. And there are different types of shared streets. And so that's been one of the challenges. We don't really have these shared streets as neighborhood streets thoroughly integrated into our planning, our network, and then the community.
Also, for the residents of 12th Street, Ms. Toner, what kinds of roadway improvements would be useful to the existing roadway now?
We'd like to work with the county to come up with options. We don't know.
Okay.
Especially if the fire marshal decides parking is going to be removed from one side. We don't want to say like sidewalks if that's going to remove additional parking. So we'd like to be able to work with somebody to come up with
Sure.
options.
Thank you.
Commissioner Yeri.
Yeah, I just did some back of the envelope or iPhone math. I'm really curious about the annual $65 loaded Smart Trip card because my math is APA saves, and I don't want to be the guy who squeezes APA, but my math is that about $3.7 million will be saved by not building the additional parking spaces. And by looking at my math, if you could provide over the course of 64 years, $65 a month to every person who didn't take a car to the site. So I'm kind of wondering how the $65 a year was agreed to. Because I'm not worried about APA, I'm worried about the developments that are going to be coming up over the course of the next year who aren't going to be using the money that they saved to build affordable housing with.
So I think one of the challenges is that the cost of parking is a cost that is delivered to every single resident that lives in a building. So, and that's delivered generally through their rents, whether they pay for it directly or indirectly, there is a cost there. And so I can't say that you save, that everybody pays that direct amount, but it's not something that completely vanishes as a cost if it's built. The other challenge, I think that you're right, there's possibly a distinction between our affordable projects, which are delivering reduced parking, and our market rate projects that are delivering reduced parking. And so I think that there is a distinction there, and I agree with you on that. It's a challenge to do the monthly subsidies because just like building the parking, the residents end up paying for that whether they use it or not. And so in the case of the county, we would be subsidizing that at some point if it did. So it's one of those tricky questions and issues that we have.
Yeah. And I agree with everything you just said. I think it was just the thing that was kind of sticking in my mind when I did the math. So
I want to go back to the YMCA's letter again. My apologies. But I feel it's really important that we achieve east-west vehicular connectivity through this study area. So can staff speak to whether a vehicular east-west connection is still achievable given where the west end of this connection is currently proposed to be by APA's dedication and where the east end of this connection is proposed to be by 11th Street, which is, of course, just beginning the site plan review process?
So we believe it is entirely deliverable by the APA project and its impacts. We have not gotten to the point that we can say that for the 11th Street development. The 11th Street development has done some things that are very important, but we're going to be asking them to do some more particularly vertical analysis to address the topography in the area to make sure that, we don't end up with one segment that has like let's say a 15% grade across of it, and that just doesn't make any sense. But what 11th Street has already done, which was requested by staff, is raise the site elevation at the Ball Family Cemetery. Currently, their site is probably 8 to 10 feet below the Ball Cemetery. So their design will raise the new north-south connection that's in their project such that it meets that grade. That's a first step, but we're going to have them look at the entire vertical and possibly horizontal geometry to identify at least one possible solution, and then the Y may have different solutions that they need to support the development plan that they advance.
Thank you. Anybody else? Commissioner Wadsworth.
Thank you. Just first of all, I want to say thanks to the two gentlemen from the American Legion for what you're doing for the veterans community in Arlington. We're home to the Pentagon. There's a lot of veterans here. There's more need coming. It actually struck me that the one gentleman mentioned that he left the Marines in 1964, and I think about what our veterans have been doing since 1964. It's been continual war, actually, almost nonstop. And this is one of the challenges we have on the commission. We're all volunteer, not necessarily any more experts than anyone on the other side of here, but we're asked to make smart decisions about things that, I'm looking at a letter here that's dated at 1:53 today, and it's filled with acronyms that I don't necessarily understand. References to things that I, have not really looked at before today, but I'm going to try to make a smart decision. So I'm just going to pull out 2 questions from the Civic Association letter and see if I can get a little clarification. One is kind of what I just referred to, American Legion operations uncertainty. What are you all going to be doing in the future? Who knows? You know, might be more wars, might be more veterans you got to take care of. So it's uncertain. So cross that one off. The other is the parking ratio. Someone raised that earlier. And I don't understand what the question is. Is it 0.46 or is it 1 or is that number accurate? Can anyone? I mean, our job is to determine if the plan meets the master transportation goals, right? So can someone give a little clarification on what the ratio is or isn't?
So I'll say you're right on both of those things. Generally, 1 is the typical site plan required ratio for each residential unit, without other reductions by the county board. And the county board is allowed to modify parking, and the applicant is coming in at a 0.43 ratio, or up to 0.46 ratio, depending on how the ADA spaces work. And so you're right on both. They're both there. So the typical requirement is the 1 space per unit, and what APA is requesting is the 0.6 that you see in that letter.
All right, I want to talk about circulation here, because we talked about it an awful lot during the planning process that led up to this development coming in. The designation of all of this possible vehicular connectivity in this area as a shared street or an alley or a pedestrian priority street was not something that came out of left field. It was a conversation that we had as a result of community input, and we had a lot of that conversation. And I think there were people who wanted it to be regular old streets, and there were people who wanted it to be bike paths and sidewalks only, and that shared street and pedestrian priority street and alley was the appropriate compromise. And I'm not comfortable with the fact that we all of a sudden seem to be throwing that out. I recognize that there's going to be a traffic light there. We have traffic lights that have driveways that dump into the intersection at the traffic light. I don't think the fact that a traffic light is there says that this has to be an asphalt street, that says that this has to be a street with, separate sidewalks. I hate that it has to be 26 feet wide in order for fire access, and I think we need to do everything that we can to tell drivers with our visual language that this is not a street that they should be driving at normal street speeds on, and the best way to do that is to build it like a shared street with pavers, just like staff and the applicant are proposing farther down. I don't support the MTP amendment as currently written. I think it should be shared street all the way up and down, as is consistent with the plan that the board adopted. I also want to say, if I personally had my way, we would absolutely be connecting this east-west connector to 12th Road North, but this isn't my decision. This is a planning process, and I respect the planning process, and I fully support that the planning process came back through and said, no, we're not connecting these new streets or vehicular connections to 12th Road North. It's a shame that we have to have this interim condition with the ugly chain and the whatnot. I'm really hopeful that once the rest of these projects get built, it can get turned into a space that is a benefit to the neighborhood, that is a little mini park with a great little path through it that connects 12th Road North, to nice, beautiful open space on the YMCA site without having to walk on Washington Boulevard or whatever. I think that'll be great. I also feel that it is important, in order not to dump a bunch of traffic onto the neighborhood streets, that we have vehicular connectivity within this big site. Like, we need an east-west road, and it needs to have cars on it, so if somebody from this development is trying to head north to Lee Highway, they can get over to Kirkwood to head that direction without having to dump traffic onto Washington Boulevard, and vice versa. When their residences are built on the YMCA site, and they want to head west over to Westover, they can get on Washington Boulevard via these new internal street connections and not dump a bunch of traffic onto 13th Street or Kirkwood or whatever. So I would urge staff, and I know there are multiple development representatives for these 3 developments in the room, to make sure that we are getting to that goal as laid out in the plan of vehicular connectivity inside. I don't think it should be asphalt. I think it should all be pavers, and you should be able to walk down the middle of the stupid thing to walk to the open space. But I also think those cars coming out of those garages need to not be going out onto 13th Street and that sort of thing. I look forward to any other commissioner thoughts on this project as we move towards a motion, and any commissioner thoughts on the MTP amendment. Commissioner Evans, can you make sure your mic's on?
Yeah, can you remind me of the timing of the other two developments, the casual adventure, and is there any?
So I can't give you specific timing on them. We hear discussions about them going forward, but until things firm up, we don't have, we can't give you any more timing. I think Wise here, they may be able to talk better about their own timing.
And what's the third project? The casual adventure is the second, and the third is?
11th Street.
Oh, okay.
And that's likely further along than the Y. That is in the SPRC process.
Sure. Thank you.
Commissioner Erie.
Question for staff. Does the 11th Street development also fall outside the map developed by the residential parking working group? Off the top of your head.
Yeah, the map from the residential parking group is entirely the sector plan boundaries. And so areas, all of our edge areas are not included. And even if they had a special study like this, they are not included.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Here we go. A question for staff. I understand concept of adding local vehiculars south street, and also combining with the shared street. From other projects, similar projects in the county, what provisions have we asked the applicants to put in place to limit conflicts with all the users on that roadway? The shared users.
So the shared use designation is relatively new for the county. I think it first came along when the Roslyn sector plan was adopted, and a few shared streets got added to the MTP at that point. And Rich will know better than me.
Only about 2 years now.
And so we don't have a lot of experience implementing the shared street. And I think my biggest concern with staff recommending this being a shared street is that we don't want it to function one way and be on a map a totally different way. And so I can understand that. We just feel that it's going to function a lot more like an urban center local street, particularly since we have the dedicated pedestrian space along the building edge. The other issue with the shared streets is that the material choices used in those are not the typical material choices for our water sewer streets department to maintain. They are also more costly than most other things. So as we look forward and into the future, if this becomes something that is implemented broadly across the county and the county has the responsibility to maintain our streets, we may need to institutionally think differently about how we maintain these spaces.
All right, hearing no further discussion, I'd like to make a motion. I move that the Transportation Commission recommend that the County Board adopt the attached resolution to amend the general land use plan from service commercial and semi-public to medium office apartment hotel for the property located at 3445 Washington Boulevard. Recommend to the County Board to adopt the attached ordinance to rezone from R5 one family and restricted two-family dwelling district and C2 service commercial community business district to CO 2.5 mixed-use district, and a related update to ACZO map 13-1 to amend line A to encompass the property for the property located at 3445 Washington Boulevard, and recommend to the county board to adopt the attached ordinance to approve site plan number 449 to construct a 160-unit multifamily dwelling with a ground floor membership club/lodge use, the American Legion Post, with modifications of use regulations, including additional density for provision of on-site committed affordable housing, residential and membership club parking ratio, fence height, and other modifications as necessary to achieve the proposed development plan for the property located at 3445 Washington Boulevard, subject to the conditions of the attached ordinance, and recommend to the county board to adopt the attached resolution to approve an amendment to the master transportation plan map, see figure 1, to add a new section of North Kansas Street north of Washington Boulevard with the following changes to the staff recommendation. 1, that the entirety of North Kansas Street be designated as a shared street topology as per the master transportation plan, and 2, that the applicant work with staff to adjust the street section and paving materials for the entirety of North Kansas Street to use pavers, color, and design language to indicate to drivers that the entire space is shared space. And it's seconded. Is there any discussion on that motion?
Mr. Chairman, can you add something along the lines of the cost element that studying that question that was added at the end here?
If you would like to make a motion to amend the motion, you can feel free, but friendly amendments are not a thing in Robert's rules.
I'm going to make a motion to add, at least investigate that question. I can't read that entire thing you just read out, but to ask that question, what is the long-term cost if the county keeps doing this every time there's a new development? That's kind of a significant long-term cost question.
All right, that's seconded. Is there any discussion on that motion to amend? This motion would add an additional proviso to the motion that we recommend that staff study the long-term financial impacts of having to maintain shared street paving materials. Is that? Yes. Okay, just making sure I understood. Commissioner Calkins.
I won't be voting to amend the friendly motion. I think staff work plans can be worked out separately and don't need to be legislated at this point, and I don't think we have enough shared street recommendations to currently have a cohesive understanding of the cost implications.
I feel similar to Commissioner Calkins.
Okay, forget it.
Once it's made and seconded, it's not your baby anymore.
Right.
We have to vote on it. All those in favor of the motion to amend, this is the motion that would simply add the wordage about studying the financial impacts. All those in favor of that motion to amend? 1. All those opposed? All right, the motion does not carry, so the original motion is before us. Any further discussion of that motion? All right, all those in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. All those opposed? Commissioner Clement? Anybody abstaining? All right, the motion passes. Thank you very much to the applicant and to staff and to all of those who came to speak.
Chairman?
Commissioner Clement.
You normally ask people for an explanation of their nay votes.
Yes, thank you, please.
I oppose it because I believe that safety is critical to this project, and that emergency vehicles do need, that 12th Street is currently inadequate for access and egress of emergency vehicles. So there's a legitimate safety issue here.
Thank you, Commissioner Clement.
And our next item is item number 6, other commission business. Our next meeting is in 3 weeks from this evening on February 28th. This is technically the March meeting that we'll have on the end of February. And staff has no other items.
Anybody else, anything to raise from site plan review, public facilities review, pedestrian advisory, anything? Commissioner Clement.
There's an issue with respect to the eastbound widening of I-66 and erosion of the adjacent bike trail that I raised with Mr. Best via email. And I'm wondering, can that be placed as an agenda item for next month's meeting?
I'm going to wait and see what staff has to say about it to see if it raises to the level, because we're a policy body, and so unless there's a particular policy implication, it doesn't really fall into our bailiwick.
That is about, at the last meeting, I requested that VDOT provide us with a briefing on enforcement of I-66, which is very definitely a policy question. And I was wondering what kind of progress there was with making those arrangements.
VDOT has been contacted, and basically will probably be coming out sometime in the next month or two to address that.
Okay, so they have agreed?
Well, they have tentatively agreed. However, they do not want to bring the police out for this exercise. It's more of a policy-to-policy item. So this is something we are exploring with VDOT.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Commissioner Wadsworth.
One more quick thing. Just, this is the second month I brought up the fact that like we kind of get these documents the day of the commission meeting, and it's very difficult to understand what we're supposed to be voting on and what exactly we're looking at, you know. I don't know if there's any way to get this stuff a little more in advance, like.
Is the TC packet or the?
Well, this is, for example, the Civic Association letter is dated today, and this other.
Yeah, they emailed it today.
Yeah,
so
yeah,
so much we can do.
I know, but I'm saying it on Arlington Public Access so that maybe somebody's listening, but it's very hard to understand what you want us to do if you send it. You know, I was at work today, so you send it while I'm at work and then I'm here at the meeting. It's very hard for us to
Well,
work on
ultimately,
what you're
staff
raising.
would recommend that it goes into the packet.
Yeah.
However, the packet goes out, we have a 48-hour rule, so you get that sometime on Monday or Tuesday.
Right.
Tuesday,
Right.
close of business at the latest.
Yeah.
Certainly, when I get the material, I kick it out to the TC.
Yeah.
Time was within an hour.
Yeah.
And we also
no,
provide hard
yeah,
copies.
no, I know it's not on your side. It's just.
Staff would agree, you know, if we got it for the packet.
Watching on YouTube, if you want us to listen to what you're saying, you got to send it in advance.
Early and often.
Yep, thank you.
Oh, Commissioner Evans.
Sorry. What is the process for potentially following up with the residents about wanting to work with the county to develop roadway improvement recommendations?
Not us.
No, that is on staff.
The policy body, and that is on staff.
Got it.
And so staff can definitely and generally does follow up with residents about what programs we have in place that do that sort of thing. You know, because we have policies around, like, you know, I know for a while we had a policy that unless you put curb and gutter in, we don't actually fully repave the street because it doesn't survive well without curb and gutter.
Right.
That sort of thing. So, you know, what the options are, because it's not a thing that's generally going to get done as part of a development project. It's
right.
You know, it's just, if it's a thing that needs to get done, then let's find the right county program to get it done.
Sure. Thank you.
All right. We are adjourned. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Excuse me. You were asking about Trail?
Yeah.
And the erosion issue?
Yeah.
So there is a project to repair
Yeah,
that.
we know about that. That's not our issue.
What is your issue?
Our issue is that the source of the problem are the intakes for what is known as a stormwater diversion bypass tunnel, underground, running parallel to eastbound 66, which is routinely clogged. VDOT is aware of the issue, okay? They believe it's a problem called deferred maintenance, and they just need to get their maintenance men on it, and it'll get fixed. Well, A, number one, they haven't done that, and B, number two, the citizens of Madison Manor, who've been on this issue for a while, believe it has to do with the actual design of those intakes, that those intakes need to be re-examined and possibly re-engineered. And they believe that now, you know, you strike while the iron is hot, because they're currently, these intakes are located adjacent to the road work that they're currently doing on eastbound I-65.